Hi everyone, we're going to talk about our first sculpture project. Our first one is pretty simple. It's made of paper, and the idea is, one, for you to learn about Dubuffet, the sculptor. We're going to touch on lots of different sculptors for the semester and how they work. Somebody asked earlier in class a great question: does it have to be black and white? It does not have to be black and white, but I do want it to have a sense that it is inspired by Dubuffet's work. Okay, so more than likely it will be black and white. If you researched his work yesterday after our video, you know that he did use some color in some of his sculpture. His sculpture is inspired by his paintings, so you can look at some of his other artwork. There's a lot of his 3D stuff has, blues and reds in it, so you can decide which direction you want to go. You can also decide if your sculpture is just an abstract piece based maybe on balance and rhythm, or maybe it is inspired like the one we saw in the film. Maybe it's inspired by a tree or an object that is just abstracted. So you can decide. I have 3 pieces here that I want to tell you what the difference in them is and how it will affect my sculpture and how I'm going to put it together. When you pick up your kit, inside your kit you have some light white-ish colored cardstock, and you're going to need something a little heavier than paper to make this stand up well. So use a couple of pieces of that cardstock. I would do some planning ahead of time to figure out which direction you need to go. And it may be that you have to paint and cut out several pieces before you decide. Or it may be, this is a good trial and error type sculpture where it may be that you start putting it together, assembling it, and then you figure out that you need more pieces, or maybe you need different sizes, or maybe you need, different shapes that you had not planned on. So there's more paper in there, so feel free to use it. The other things in your kit are enough for 3 projects for sure, possibly 4, and then we'll have another round of stuff to pick up. So you can approach this in a couple of ways. You could build the sculpture and then add the black to it. I think that would be a little bit more challenging, but the way that I've got it constructed, I'm going to have to add some black once I get it put together on the base anyway. So you can decide. What I did was I painted these lines and I've been letting them dry, and I'm about to cut them apart and show you how I would start assembling it. The reason I did 3 different ones, number 1, I wanted you to see the difference in craftsmanship. This one looks really sloppy. Can you see? My lighting in here is terrible, I apologize. So the lines are not consistent. They're not filled in all the way. It just looks rushed, and you want this to be well crafted. Anything you do, whether it's in this class or any class, it reflects on you how your craftsmanship is. So just make sure it's precise and clean, okay? So I could clean that one up and it would be usable. But I also want, the thickness of the black lines to be the same. I don't want some that are super skinny and some that are not. Now, these, you're thinking, oh, well, those could go on the same sculpture. Maybe, but if you look closely, this one is based on curved lines and this one is very angular. So I'm not sure that those would go together, because I want it to have a cohesive look. I want it to look like everything was meant to be, designed to be together. So you can experiment around with that. I'm not sure which direction you're headed for your sculpture, so I'm not sure. Once you get the lines painted and they dry, and I want you to notice, I also painted the outside edge because I'm not sure if this is going to be the top or if it's going to be the bottom yet. I haven't decided. So I'm going to go ahead and paint all of the edges. Now, the back isn't painted, so if I can see the back when I get my sculpture assembled, I'm going to have to go back and change that. And it may be that I have, that I want to add some lines on the inside once I get it put together. So I'm going to take my scissors and I'm going to very carefully try and cut these out, going right down the middle so that I still have a black outline on each piece. the piece I'm cutting out and the piece that's left behind. And it may be that, you know, in one sitting you are doing some sketches to figure out what your plan is, and then you paint your lines, and then you come back to it the next go around and it's dry, and you cut it apart and start planning your assembly. All right, so I've got all of my pieces. Also inside your kit, you have a glue gun, which you might use for this, but I bet you can do most of it just by cutting and constructing it together. You also have in your kit a piece of mat board. It's black on one side, it's white on the other. I'm going to use black for my base, and it may be that this is too big. You can probably cut this, if you draw a line with a ruler, you can probably cut it with either your X-Acto knife or your scissors. I'm going to say this again, if you're using that X-Acto knife, make sure you have the cutting mat underneath you, and make sure you're just aware of it, okay? You're thinking, it's just an X-Acto knife, you're not going to cut your hand off. I have actually had 8 stitches from an X-Acto knife, so I'm just telling you, be careful with an X-Acto knife. It can happen. So make sure you are not cutting yourself or your furniture, all right? So I'm going to take these, I'm going to start positioning them together and seeing how I like certain things. And I may decide that once I decide how it's going to go, I'm going to do the cuts for it, and then I am going to take the pieces apart and paint the back side of them, let those dry, and then put it back together. So this first initial cutting, even if I'm going to need some hot glue, I'm not going to use it yet. All right, so let's say that I want this one here and I want this one to kind of position and hold that up. I'm going to cut a very small line right there. The reason I didn't cut it very large is because I don't want it to get loose. Now, if I want it to go down a little farther, let's say I have it this way, then I could adjust, but I can't uncut it. So I am going to err on the side of making it too small, and then I can go back and make it larger. Then I'm gonna decide how this one's gonna fit. And it's almost like making a house of cards where you're just positioning and maneuvering. And I may end up that I don't use all my pieces, or it may be that I need more pieces. I don't know yet. So I also have to consider when I'm making a sculpture, where is this going to be? Is it in a public park? Is this like a scale model of it? Is it going to be something that, you know, is sitting on a pedestal inside of a hotel? Where, you know, think about where it's going to be and who the audience is going to be, because you have to consider the height and all of those things. All right, so I'm just going to keep constructing. I think I'm going to put, I think I might put this one horizontal. And I'm going to try my best to make it balance without the glue first. I can do the glue to secure it and assemble it securely, but I'm going to see if I can balance it without that first. So far the answer is no. Okay, so there it goes. And then I'm going to keep positioning this around. I don't know if you can see it from this side yet very well. And then once I get it how I want it, I'm probably going to take a picture of it with my phone and then disassemble it, paint the back sides of those, and then put it back together. And it could be that I decide, you know, to display it in a different format completely. So you can decide on yours how you want it to go. And but I wouldn't necessarily do your first thought. I would position it in several different directions. And then if you decide that you need to secure it with some hot glue, you can. You also have in your kit, you've got all sorts of colors of paint like this. You've got the primaries, black and white, so you can make any color that you want. You also have a little container like this that is white, that is glue. So make sure that you read the label on the top that says glue, and it's just Elmer's regular white glue. So let me know if you have questions or you need help. Otherwise, I would go ahead and start planning and painting and letting that first round dry.